The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock. My daughter-in-law's careful handwriting flowing across the paper in that practiced elegance she'd cultivated since marrying my eldest son. Please, join us for dinner this Saturday at 7:00 p.m. We have something important to discuss. Don't forget to subscribe to one.com, the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I set the card on my Divine Hour kitchen counter next to the stack of financial statements I'd been reviewing, sets my late husband had built over 40 years of careful investment, now worth just over $2 million. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 3 months of sporadic phone calls and excuses about busy schedules, suddenly they wanted to talk. My reflection caught in the kitchen window as twilight settled over my suburban Phoenix home. At 68, I still carried myself with the posture my collar's mother had drilled into me decades ago. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes forward. But something in my gaze had hardened over the past year. Since George's funeral, since I'd begun to understand how my sons truly saw me. The house felt cavernous without George's presence. 42 years of marriage had filled every corner with shared memories, inside jokes, and the comfortable silence of two people who'd grown old together. Now, at night, I heard only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. The loneliness was a physical ache, settling in my chest like a stone. I'd raised Malcolm and Owen to be independent, successful men. Malcolm, now 42, had built a thriving real estate development company. Owen, 39, worked as a financial advisor, managing portfolios for wealthy clients. Both had married well-educated women, lived in expensive homes, sent their children to private schools. I should have been proud, and I was until I began to see the calculations behind their smiles. Saturday evening arrived with the dry heat that made Phoenix summers unbearable. I chose my outfit carefully, a teal silk blouse that George had always loved, paired with cream slacks and the pearl earrings he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified, not like the doddering widow they seemed to expect. Malcolm's house sat in an exclusive Scottsdale neighborhood, all desert landscaping and modern angles that spoke of architect, fees, and landscape designers. Samantha, his wife, greeted me at the door with her trademark smile, brilliant white teeth, carefully applied lipstick, eyes that never quite reached warmth. "Carolyn, you look wonderful." She kissed my cheek, and I caught her signature perfume, something expensive and cloying. Come in. The boys are in the living room. The boys. At 42 and 39, my sons were still boys to their process, wives, still children who needed managing. I followed Samantha through the marble-floored entryway, past abstract paintings that probably cost more than most people's cars. Malcolm stood as I entered the living room, his embrace perfunctory, but performed for Samantha's benefit. He'd inherited George's height, but not his warmth. Where my husband had been genuinely kind, Malcolm had learned to simulate it. Owen rose from the leather sectional, his hug equally hollow. Iris, Owen's wife, offered her practiced smile from across the room. "Mom, you look great," Owen said, though his eyes were already moving past me, checking his phone, calculating something. We made small talk over wine, Samantha's latest charity committee, Iris's yoga instructor certification, the grandchildren's achievements at their respective private schools. I sipped my Chardonnay and nodded at appropriate intervals, but my attention was on the faith undercurrents, the glances between spouses, the way conversations steered carefully around certain topics. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, crystal and china arranged with Samantha's usual precision. The conversation continued its polite dance until dessert arrived. A tiramisu that Samantha claimed to have made herself, though I recognized the distinctive plating from an expensive local restaurant. "Mom," Malcolm began, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "We wanted to talk to you about your living situation." The stone in my chest grew heavier. I kept my expression neutral. Years of social conditioning serving me well. "Oh," Samantha leaned forward, her smile reaching maximum wattage. "We've been so worried about you, rattling around in that big house all by yourself. It can't be healthy. The maintenance alone must be overwhelming," Iris added, her voice pitched to convey concerned sympathy. "All those repairs, the yard work, the utilities." I'd been handling household maintenance for 42 years, had run a 10-tama Blackning, small bookkeeping business from home, while raising 2 children, had managed our family's finances with meticulous care. But suddenly, according to my daughters-in-law, I was incompetent. "We found the perfect solution," Owen continued, reaching for a brochure that had been conveniently placed nearby. "Set Gardens is a beautiful senior living community. They have all kinds of activities, bridge tournaments, book clubs, exercise classes." Samantha's eyes practically sparkled. "You'll love the new senior home. It has bingo nights." I took the brochure. Its glossy pages filled with stock photos of silver-haired models laughing over craft projects and playing shuffleboard. The prices were listed on the back page. $4,800 per month for a 1-bedroom apartment. Not coincidentally, almost exactly what my house would rent for. "It's really the sensible thing," Malcolm said, his tone suggesting the decision had already been made. "You'd have built-in companionship, medical care if you need it. No worries about home maintenance, and think of the equity you'd free up from the house," Owen added, unable to keep the financial advisor's gleam from his eyes. "We could help you invest it properly. Make sure it lasts." The room fell silent, except for the soft jazz playing through Samantha's expensive sound system. 4 pairs of eyes watched me, waiting for my response. They expected gratitude, perhaps some token resistance that they could gently overcome with reasonable arguments about my well-being. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, I'd learned over the past year of carefully observing my sons and their wives to deploy different varieties of expression for different purposes. "How thoughtful of you all to plan my future," I said quietly. The silence stretched. Samantha's smile faltered slightly. "We just want what's best for you, Mom," Malson said, his voice carrying the slightest edge of impatience. I nodded slowly, as if considering their words. Inside, a cold clarity was settling over me like frost on a window. I thought of George, how he'd worked 60-hour weeks for decades to build our security, how he'd trusted our sons to care for me after he was gone, how naive we'd both been. "When would this move happen?" I asked, my voice steady. "Well," Samantha said, relief evident in her brightening expression. "The sooner the better, really." Sunset. Gardens has a waiting list, but they have an opening next month. We could help you pack, of course, and we've already spoken to a realtor," Owen added. "The housing market is strong right now. You could get top dollar." I studied their faces, eager, expectant, already counting their inheritance. They'd miscalculated my grief as weakness, my silence as compliance. They saw a lonely, old woman overwhelmed by widowhood, ready to be managed and controlled. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "I'll need some time to think about it," I said finally. "Of course," Malcolm said quickly. "Take all the time you need, but don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't stay available forever." I gathered my purse, accepted their perfunctory hugs, and walked to my car with the same measured a pace I'd maintained all evening. As I drove through the desert night toward my empty house, my mind was already working, calculating, planning. They wanted to warehouse me in a senior facility while they liquidated my life's confront, work. They'd underestimated me completely. That was going to be their first mistake, but not their last. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in George's leather chair in our study, surrounded by the financial documents I'd been avoiding since his death. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, insurance policies, the dozen-and paper trail of a life built on careful planning and delayed gratification. By dawn, I had a complete picture of my financial position. George had been more successful than even I'd realized. Beyond the house, worth approximately $850,000. In the current market, we had investment accounts totaling $1.3 million, a small rental property in Tempe worth $320,000, and life insurance proceeds I'd invested in CDs. The total was just over $2.1 million. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, enough to leave a substantial inheritance, enough to make my sons impatient. The phone rang at 8:30. Malkin's name appeared on the phone. Caller ID. Mom, just wanted to check in. After last night, I hope we didn't overwhelm you with information. His voice carried that false warmth I'd grown to recognize, the tone he probably used with difficult clients. Not at all, I replied, measuring my words carefully. I've been thinking about everything you said. Good. And what are your initial thoughts? I could hear the eagerness he was trying to suppress. I think you may be right about the house being too much for me to handle alone. That's wonderful to hear, Mom. Really. It's the practical choice. I'd like to visit Sunset Gardens myself before making any decisions. Of course, Samantha could arrange a tour. She knows the director there. Of course, she did. How convenient. That would be lovely. But I'd prefer to go alone first, just to get my own impressions. A pause. Are you sure? It might be helpful to have someone there to ask the right questions. I'm quite capable of asking my own questions, Malcolm. The edge in my voice was slight but unmistakable. Another pause. Of course you are. I'll have Samantha get you the contact information. After I hung up, I sat in the morning silence, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through George's study windows. 42 years in this house. 42 years of memories embedded in every room, every corner, every carefully chosen piece of furniture. The study held George's presence most strongly. His books still lined the shelves, biographies of business, leaders, investment guides, a collection of World War II histories he'd never finished reading. His reading glasses lay folded on the desk beside a half-completed crossword puzzle from the day before his heart attack. I picked up the glasses, traced the familiar worn spots on the arms where his fingers had gripped them thousands of times. If he were here now, what would he think of his son's behavior? Would he be as shocked as I was? Or had he seen signs I'd missed? The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Through the front window, I saw Owen's BMW in the driveway. Mom, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by, he said when I opened the door. Another lie. Owen's office was 30 minutes away, and this wasn't on the 5 route to anywhere he needed to be. How thoughtful. Come in. He followed me to the kitchen, his eyes scanning the rooms with an appraiser's attention to detail. I'd noticed him doing this more frequently since George's funeral, cataloging our possessions with increasing boldness. Coffee? I asked. Sure, thanks. He settled at the Pryman breakfast table where he'd eaten countless meals as a child, where George had helped him with algebra homework, where we'd celebrated his acceptance to college. I prepared the coffee with deliberate slowness, using the time to study my younger son. Owen had always been the more transparent of my two boys, his emotions closer to the surface than Malcolin's controlled facade. Today, his leg bounced with nervous energy. So he said as I set his cup down, "Malcolm told me you're considering the senior community idea. I'm exploring all my options." "That's smart." "Really?" "Smart." He sipped his coffee, then looked around the kitchen again. "This place holds so many memories. I know it must be hard to think about leaving." "Yes, it is. But you know, Mom, memories aren't tied to a building. They're in here." He tapped his chest, a gesture that might have seemed touching if I hadn't seen him check his watch twice in the past minute. "Is that what you think?" "Definitely. And honestly, the financial freedom you'd have from selling could really enhance your lifestyle. You could travel, maybe take some of those art classes you used to talk about." I sat across from him, noting how his eyes brightened when he mentioned the financial benefits. Travel does sound appealing. Exactly. And Iris and I were talking. We could help you manage the proceeds from the house sale. I mean, that's what I do for a living, right? Family should take care of family. There, it was. The real reason for his visit. "You'd want to manage my investments? Only if you wanted me to. No pressure, but I could probably get you better returns than whatever conservative approach Dad was using." Conservative approach. George's careful, methodical investment strategy had built our wealth over 4 decades, weathering multiple market downturns through diversification and patience. But to Owen, it was merely conservative code for insufficient, inadequate, leaving money on the table. "What kind of returns are we talking about?" Owen's eyes lit up. "Well, I've got several clients seeing 15, even 20% annual returns with aggressive growth strategies, emerging markets, some cryptocurrency exposure." Cryptocurrency. I almost smiled. George would have laughed at the idea of gambling our life. "Savings on digital tokens. That sounds very ambitious," I said carefully. "The thing is, Mom, at your age," he caught himself, probably realizing how that sounded. "I mean, given your current life stage, you want your money working as hard as possible, because I might not have much time left to enjoy it." A flush crept up his neck. "That's not what I meant," but it was exactly what he meant. In Owen's calculations, I was a credit visit, diminishing asset, a temporary inconvenience before my wealth transferred to the next generation. Better to take risks with my security, since he and Malcolm would ultimately benefit from any gains and wouldn't suffer from any losses. "I appreciate your offer," I said, "but I'll need to think about it. Of course, no rush." But his disappointed expression suggested otherwise. After he left, I called Sunset Gardens and scheduled a tour for the following afternoon. Then I made another call to Adam Sandler, George's attorney and longtime friend. "Carolyn," Adam said when his secretary put me through, "how are you holding up better each day?" I replied, "Adam, I need to ask you about something hypothetically. Of course, if someone wanted to protect assets from premature distribution, what options would they have?" A long pause. "Are we talking about protecting assets from creditors or from family members who might have expectations about inheritance timing?" Adam had always been perceptive. "The latter, I see." "Well, there are several vehicles: irrevocable trusts, offshore accounts, certain types of annuities. It depends on the specific situation and goals. What if someone wanted to ensure their assets remained under their complete control during their lifetime, but also wanted to prevent others from pressuring them about financial decisions? That's very doable. In fact, it's something I recommend to many of my clients, especially widows who find themselves receiving unwanted financial advice from adult children." His tone suggested this was not an uncommon scenario. "Could we meet sometime this week to discuss specific options?" "Absolutely. How about Thursday morning? And Caroline, whatever you're considering, I want you to know that protecting your financial autonomy is not selfish. It's sensible. Thursday morning couldn't come fast enough. The tour of Sunset Gardens that Wednesday afternoon was exactly what I'd expected. The facility was clean, well-staffed, and efficiently designed to warehouse aging bodies with maximum profitability. The activities director, a determinedly cheerful woman named Barbara, showed me the craft room, the small library, the dining hall with its scheduled meal times and assigned seating. We find that structure really helps our residents feel secure, Barbara explained as we passed a group of elderly people watching television in the common area. Several were asleep in their chairs. The apartment I was shown was pleasant enough. One bedroom, a bit small living area, a kitchenette with a microwave and two-burner stove, no full oven, no space for a proper dining table, no room for George's books or the piano I'd played for 50 years. It's very efficient, I commented. That's exactly the word we use, efficient living, for the next chapter of life. The next chapter, as if everything that came before was simply prologue to this final act of managed decline. That evening, Malcolm called. How was the tour? He asked. Educational. And what did you think? I paused, letting him wait. I think I understand now what you and Owen have in mind for me. We just want you to be safe and happy, Mom. Do you? Or do you want me to be managed and controlled? The silence stretched longer, this time. I don't know what you mean, he said finally. I think you do, Melkon. I think you know exactly what you mean. I hung up before he could respond, my heart racing with the thrill of finally speaking truth. For the first time since George's death, I felt fully awake, every nerve ending alive with purpose. Tomorrow, I would meet with Adam. Tomorrow, I would begin building the costive fortress that would protect everything George and I had worked for. And my sons would learn that their mother was far from the helpless widow they'd imagined. Adam Sandler's law office occupied the top floor of a modest building in Old Town Scottsdale, the kind of place that prioritized substance over flash. I'd always appreciated that about Adam. In a city obsessed with appearances, he focused on results. Carolyn, he said, rising from behind his mahogany desk as his secretary showed me in. At 72, Adam carried himself with the dignified bearing of someone who'd spent 5 decades helping people navigate life's complexities. You look well. I feel more clear-headed than I have in months, I replied, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. Good. Clarity is essential for what we're going to discuss. He opened a file folder, revealing several documents he'd prepared. I've outlined some options based on our phone conversation. But first, I want to understand exactly what you're dealing with. I told him everything. The dinner invitation, the senior facility tour, Owen's investment, pitch, Malcolm's barely concealed impatience. Adam listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. How long has this been going on? He asked when I finished. The pressure started about 6 months after George's funeral. Subtle at first. Comments about the house being too big, suggestions that I seemed overwhelmed. It's escalated significantly in the past month, and their wives are involved. Samantha orchestrated the dinner. Iris supports Owen's financial management pitch. They present a united front. Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Caroline, I've seen this pattern many times. Adult children who view their widowed parent as an impediment to their inheritance rather than a person, deserving respect and autonomy. Is it legal what they're trying to do? If they can convince you to agree. Absolutely. That's why psychological pressure is their weapon of choice. Their counting on your love for them, your desire to avoid family conflict, your fear of being truly alone. The accuracy of his assessment stung. They knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. What are my options? Adam slid a document across the desk. Option 1. An irrevocable trust. You transfer your assets to the trust, which you control as trustee during your lifetime. Upon your death, the assets distribute according to terms you set now, which could include conditions your sons would have to meet. What kind of conditions? Whatever you choose. Demonstrating genuine care for your well-being, respecting your autonomy, even something as simple as regular meaningful contact, not motivated by financial interest. I studied the document, recognizing the power in its legal language. And if they don't meet these conditions, the assets could go to charities, other family members, or organizations of your choosing. The beauty of an irrevocable trust is that once it's established, no one can pressure you to change it because legally you can't. Option 2. A. Revocable trust combined with a comprehensive financial strategy that removes your assets from easy access while maintaining your control. We structure your finances so that pressuring you becomes pointless. The money isn't available for premature distribution under any circumstances. And option 3. Adam smiled, the expression carrying a hint of mischief. The nuclear option. You liquidate everything, move your assets offshore, and disappear. Start fresh somewhere else on your own terms. The nuclear option. The phrase resonated with something deep inside me, a desire for a complete autonomy that I'd suppressed for decades in favor of family harmony. Tell me more about option 3. There are countries with favorable tax treaties, excellent healthcare systems, and strong legal protections for foreign residents. Portugal, for instance, has a retirement visa program that's quite attractive. Costa Rica, certain areas of CUD. Spain, Portugal, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. You've been there? George and I honeymooned in Lisbon 42 years ago. We always said we'd go back. We never had, of course. There had always been reasons to delay. The boys' school events, business obligations, the comfortable inertia of established routine. The Algarve region is particularly popular with American retirees. Excellent climate, reasonable cost of living, English-speaking expatriate community, if you want it. As he spoke, images formed in my mind. Whitewashed houses, overlooking the ocean, markets filled with fresh fish and local produce, cafes where I could sit with a book. And no, one would know me as anyone's mother or a widow. How long would it take to arrange? If you're serious, 6 weeks for the visa paperwork, assuming we expedite everything. Another 2 weeks to establish banking relationships and handle the financial transfers. 8 weeks. 8 weeks to dismantle a life and rebuild it. Somewhere else. Somewhere beyond the reach of manipulative children and their calculating spouses. I want to explore this option, I said. Are you sure? It's a dramatic step. You'd be leaving. Everything familiar is being poisoned by their behavior. I interrupted. Adam, they're not going to. Stop. They'll keep pushing until I'm warehoused in that facility, and they pay to control my finances. I won't live the rest of my life as a managed asset. He studied my face for a long moment. Your decision. But I need to know. Is this revenge, or is this reclaiming your life? Can't it be both? His smile widened. In that case, let's discuss the details. For the next 2 hours, we planned my escape with military precision. Adam would establish a private trust based in the Bahamas, completely legal, but effectively untouchable by anyone except me. My assets would be liquidated, systematically converted to international investments, and transferred in amounts that wouldn't trigger reporting requirements. The house will take longest to sell, Adam noted, unless you're willing to accept a quick sale price. I'm not in a hurry. I want them to think I'm considering their suggestions while we prepare everything. How will you handle their pressure in the meantime? Let me worry about that. That evening, Samantha called. Caroline, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. Malkin mentioned your tour of Sunset Gardens went well. It was informative. Wonderful. I was thinking, would you like me to arrange a second visit? Maybe we could go together this time and I could introduce you to some of the residents. They're such lovely people. Such lovely people. Warehoused, managed, their independent lives reduced to scheduled activities and supervised socialization. That's very thoughtful, Samantha, but I'm still processing everything. Of course these decisions take time, but I do hope you won't wait too long. I'd hate for you to miss this opportunity. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine George had been saving for a special occasion that never came. I sat in his chair, surrounded by his books, and began making my own list. Items to sell discreetly. The good jewelry, George's watch collection, the silver service we'd received as wedding gifts, and used perhaps a dozen times in 42 years. Items to donate, most of the furniture, George's extensive wardrobe, kitchen equipment I'd never need in a dainty Portuguese apartment. Items to take, my grandmother's china, George's favorite, photographs, the photo albums documenting our life together, a handful of books that held special meaning, items to leave behind, everything else, including the illusions I'd harbored about my son's character. The phone rang, again at 9:00. Malcolm, Mom, Samantha said she talked to you earlier. She's being really excited about helping you with this transition, so I gathered. I know it's a big decision, but we really think this is the right move. And honestly, the sooner you sell the house, the better. The market's starting to show signs of softening. Even now, he couldn't resist the pressure tactics. Malkin, I've been thinking about what you said the other night about Sunset Gardens, about family taking care of. Family. His voice brightened. Exactly. That's what this is all about. I agree. Completely. Family should take care of her. Family. The question is, which family? Members have actually been doing that? Silence. I'm not sure what you mean. Mom, when did you last visit me without wanting something? When did you last call just to talk? When did you last show interest in my well-being that wasn't connected to my housing situation or my finances? That's not fair. We've been busy, but that doesn't mean we don't care. Busy for 8 months. Too busy to check on your widowed mother except when you need to discuss my living arrangements. Mom, you're being unreasonable. Unreasonable? The word men, used when women refuse to be compliant. Perhaps I am, I said quietly. Perhaps I'm finally being unreasonable after being reasonable for 68 years. I hung up before he could respond. In the silence that followed, I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of bonds I hadn't realized had grown so tight. For decades, I'd prioritized harmony over that is everyone Neverton. Honesty, peace over truth. I'd swallowed small hurts to avoid larger conflicts, accepted disrespect, disguised as concern. No more. I walked to George's desk and pulled out the travel magazines as he'd collected over the years, the ones filled with pictures of places we'd planned to visit someday. Portugal, featured prominently sun-drenched. Coastlines, ancient cities, peaceful, villages where life moved at a gentler pace. Someday had arrived, but first, I had a performance to deliver. The performance began the next morning with a phone call to Malkin. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, I said, injecting just the right note of uncertainty into my voice. Perhaps I was being defensive. Mom, I understand this is overwhelming. It is. Everything feels so complicated without your father. I think I may need more help than I've been willing to admit. The relief in his voice was audible. That's completely natural. Dad handled so much that you probably didn't even realize. George had handled the lawn care and car maintenance. I'd managed everything else. The investments, the taxes, the household, finances, the social calendar, the family logistics. But I let Malkin believe his narrative. Would you and Owen be available to meet this weekend? I'd like to discuss the practical aspects of making some changes. Absolutely. Saturday afternoon, we could meet at your house, go through some of the details. That would be perfect. Over the next 3 days, I played my part with Academy Award precision. I asked Samantha tentative questions about Sunset Gardens meal plans. I mentioned to Iris how overwhelming the house maintenance had become. I even called Owen to inquire about his investment strategies, letting him explain complex financial concepts as if I'd never heard of compound interest. Meanwhile, Adam worked with military efficiency. Documents were prepared, accounts were identified for transfer, and contacts were established with Portuguese banks and real estate agents. We moved with the careful choreography of a heist film, each step calculated to avoid detection. The key, Adam explained, during one of our clandestine meetings, is to make the transfers look routine. We'll start with smaller amounts. Your dividend payments, some CD maturations that were scheduled anyway. Nothing that would trigger their attention if they're extamaltac, monitoring your accounts. Are they monitoring my accounts? Owen's a financial advisor. If he's calculating as you've described, he's probably found ways to track your general financial activity. Not illegal. If you've given him access, even informally, the thought that Owen might be spying on my finances should have shocked me. Instead, it confirmed what I'd already suspected about the depth of their manipulation. On Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. My sister, Patricia, who lived in Denver and rarely traveled, stood on my doorstep with a worried expression. Caroline, I'm concerned about you. Patricia, what a surprise. Come in. She followed me to the living room, her eyes taking in the space with the same appraising attention I'd noticed in my sons. Malkan called me. She said he's worried about you, living alone. And honestly, after talking to him, I am too. Of course, they'd enlisted reinforcements. What exactly did Malkin tell you? That you've been struggling since George died? That you're overwhelmed by the house? Confused about financial matters? Resistant to help? He thinks you might be having some memory issues. Memory issues? The classic accusation used to undermine elderly women who refuse to be compliant. And what do you think, Patricia? She studied my face carefully. You seem fine to me. Maybe a little thinner, but that's normal after losing a spouse. Your conversation is perfectly clear. Then why are you here? Because Malkan was very convincing. He painted a picture of a sister who was declining rapidly and too proud to admit it. He said, you'd been making irrational decisions. Talking about selling the Stom as house and moving somewhere ridiculous. Ridiculous? He mentioned Portugal. Caroline, you don't speak Portuguese. You've never lived anywhere but Arizona and California. It would be completely impractical. I poured us both tea, using the time to consider my response. Patricia meant well, but she'd always been susceptible to male authority. Always more willing to believe my sons than to trust her own observations. What? If it's not impractical? I asked. What? If it's exactly what I need? But why so? Far away? Why not somewhere closer where family can help if you need it? Because family isn't helping. Patricia, family is trying to control. She set down her teacup with a sharp clink. That's not fair. Your sons are successful men who want to take care of their mother. My sons are successful men who want to manage their inheritance while I'm still alive to facilitate the process. Carolyn, how can you say such a thing? Because it's true. They don't call unless they want something. They don't visit unless they have an agenda. They've spent 8 months trying to convince me I'm incompetent so they can justify taking control of my finances. Patricia's face flushed. You're being paranoid. Am I? When did Owen last call? You just to chat? When did Malcolm last visit without discussing your living situation or your finances? That's different. I'm not widowed. I don't need. Exactly. You don't need managing. So, they don't bother with you either. The truth hit her like a physical blow. I could see it in her eyes. The recognition that her nephew's attention to me wasn't born of love, but of financial interest. What are you going to have this to do? She asked quietly. I'm going to live my life on my own terms for however many years I have left. And if you're Donna making a mistake, then it's my mistake to make. After Patricia left, confused, worried, but unable to argue with my logic, I called Adam. How are the Tenjing? Preparations coming? Better than expected. The trust is established. Portuguese visa application is in process, and I've identified a property as management company that specializes in American expatriates. You could be settled in Lisbon within 6 weeks if you decide to move forward. I've decided. Do it. Caroline, are you absolutely certain? Once we start the major asset transfers, there's no going back without significant complications. Adam, I've spent the last 3 days pretending to be the confused, helpless widow my sons want me to be. I'm tired of performing weakness to spare their feelings. Start. The transfers. Saturday afternoon, arrived gray and overcast. Unusual for Phoenix in October. Malcolm and Owen arrived together, both carrying legal pads and wearing the expressions of men, preparing to close a difficult deal. Samantha and Iris came too, uninvited, but not unwelcome. I wanted witnesses for what was about to unfold. Mom, you look tired, Samantha said, her voice full of manufactured concern. Have you been sleeping well? Well enough. We gathered in the living room, the same space where George and I had hosted countless family celebrations, where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, countless milestones. Now it felt like a boardroom, so Malcolm began consulting his notes. We've prepared some preliminary estimates for the house sale and identified several investment options for the proceeds. Owen opened his own folder, and I've run some numbers on the assisted living costs versus your current expenses. The BUD monthly savings alone would fund some really nice trips. They'd prepared charts, financial projections, even a timeline for the transition. The thoroughness of their planning revealed how long they'd been working on this scheme. This is very impressive, I said, accepting their documents with apparent gratitude. You've obviously put a lot of thought into my future. We just want what's best for you, Mom, Malcolm said. And what's best for this family overall, Owen added, making sure resources are used efficiently. Resources, not mother, not family. Matriarch, not the woman who'd raised them and supported their dreams. Resources. I do have some questions, I said. Of course, Samantha said brightly. We want you to feel completely comfortable with the decision. Who would handle the house sale? I've already identified a realtor, Malcolm said. Someone who specializes in quick sales and my personal belongings. We could help you sort through everything, Iris offered. Decide what's worth keeping and what should be donated. What about George's things? His books, his workshop, tools, his collection of model airplanes. Glances were exchanged. We thought we could distribute those among the grandchildren, Owen said. as keepsakes, distribute like party favors. And if I wanted to travel before, settling into Sunset Gardens, travel? Malcolin's voice carried a note of alarm. Mom, I'm not sure that's practical at this stage of life. What stage is that exactly? Well, you're 68, and traveling alone can be challenging. Your father and I traveled extensively. I've never had any difficulty with travel. That was different, Samantha said gently. George was there to handle the logistics. George, who had always relied on me to book flights, arrange accommodations, and navigate foreign countries because I was better with languages and logistics. But in their revision of history, I'd been the helpless, dependent. I see. I set their papers aside and folded my hands in my lap. So, your recommendation is that I sell my home, move into supervised housing, liquidate my assets for you to Devon, manage and abandon any thoughts of independent travel or adventure? We wouldn't put it quite like that, Owen began. How would you put it? We want to ensure your safety and security, Malcolm said. Whose safety and security? Yours, of course. Really? Because it sounds like you want to ensure your financial security by eliminating any possibility that I might spend my inheritance on myself. The room went silent, except for the tick of George's grandfather clock. 4 faces stared at me with varying expressions of shock and dismay. Mom said carefully, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions. Am I? Then explain to me why, in 8 months of widowhood, this is the first time you've all been in my house together. Explain why every conversation we've had has centered on my housing and my story. Finances. Explain why you've enlisted my sister to convince me I'm incompetent. We enlisted Patricia because we're hard worried. You enlisted Patricia because you needed an ally to support your narrative that I'm declining mentally. Samantha's face flushed red. Carolyn, that's not. It's exactly what this is. You want me manageable, controllable, and grateful for your intervention. You want to be heroes, saving their helpless mother while conveniently gaining access to her assets. I stood, moving to George's desk, where I'd placed a single sheet of paper. I have something for you. I picked up the single sheet of paper from George's desk, feeling the weight of this moment settle around me. Like a mantle, 4 pairs of eyes watched me with growing unease as I returned to my chair. This is a letter I wrote to your father shortly after his diagnosis. I began, my voice steady and clear. He was so worried about leaving me alone, so concerned about whether you boys would take care of me. I promised him you would. Malcolm shifted, uncomfortably. Mom, we are taking care of you. Let me finish. The authority in my voice silenced him instantly. George made me promise something in return. He made me promise that I wouldn't let anyone, not even family, treat me as less than I am. He said the worst thing that could happen to me wasn't being alone, but being surrounded by people who saw me as a burden to be managed rather than a person to be respected. I looked at each of their faces, memorizing this moment. Your father was a wise man. What does this have to do with Owen started everything? I set the letter aside and reached for another document. This is a copy of the trust agreement I established 3 weeks ago. All of my assets, the house, the investments, the life insurance, proceeds, everything have been transferred to an irrevocable trust. The color drained from Malcolin's face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about protecting myself from exactly what you're trying to do to me. I opened the document, scanning the legal language that had become as familiar as a prayer. The trust ensures that my assets remain under my complete control during my lifetime, but cannot be accessed by anyone else under any circumstances. You can't do that, Owen said, his voice rising. Those assets are part of the family estate. Those assets belong to me, earned by your father and me over 42 years of marriage, not gifted to you, not promised to you, not held in trust, for your benefit. Samantha's mask of concerned daughter-in-law finally slipped. This is insane. You're being manipulated by someone. That lawyer is taking advantage of you. Adam Sandler has been our family attorney for 25 years. He's protecting me from, manipulation, not enabling it. Iris leaned forward, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she probably used with difficult clients at her yoga studio. Caroline, you're clearly not thinking rationally. These kinds of major financial decisions shouldn't be made while you're still grieving. I'm not grieving anymore, I interrupted. I finished grieving for your father months ago. What I've been grieving since then is the relationship I thought I had with Climley, my sons. Malcolm stood abruptly, pacing to the window. This is insane. Mom, you're going to end up alone and broke, and we won't be able to help you. I'm already alone. And Malcolm, I've been alone since your father died because none of you has shown genuine interest in my well-being. As for broke, I smiled, feeling the satisfaction of a chess player revealing checkmate. That's where things get interesting. I reached for a third document. This is my new will, executed last week. Since you've all made it clear that you view me as an impediment to your inheritance, rather than a mother deserving respect, I've made some adjustments to the distribution of my estate. What kind of adjustments? Owen's voice was barely a whisper. The assets in the trust will be distributed upon my death according to very specific criteria. Recipients must demonstrate genuine care for my dead well-being through regular, meaningful contact. They must respect my autonomy and decisions, and they must treat me as a person, not as a financial resource to be managed. That's subjective, Malcolm said desperately. How would anyone determine the trust has an independent executive? Someone who's observed your behavior toward me over the past year. Someone who can objectively evaluate whether you've met the criteria. The silence stretched as the implications sank in. They had pushed and manipulated and calculated, certain they could pressure me into compliance. They had never considered that their behavior was being documented, evaluated, judged. Who's the executive? Samantha asked. Someone who's watched you dismiss my capabilities, pressure me into the decisions, and treat me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be cherished. I stood and walked to the procrast mantelpiece, where George's photograph smiled down at the wreckage of what had once been a family gathering. But here's the most interesting part, I continued. The trust doesn't just protect my assets from your manipulation. It protects me from having to endure any more of your false concern. What do you mean, Iris? Asked. I turned back to face them, feeling lighter than I had in months. I mean that as of next Tuesday, I'll be beyond your reach entirely. Are you moving to Sunset Gardens after all? Malkin asked, hopefully. No, Malkin, I'm moving to Portugal. The words hung in the air like a detonation. 4 faces stared at me with identical expressions of shock and disbelief. Portugal? Owen repeated. The Algarve region. Specifically, I've purchased a small villa overlooking the ocean. The same ocean your father and I walked beside during our honeymoon 42 years ago. You can't just move to Portugal. Samantha sputtered. You don't speak the language. You don't know anyone there. I speak enough Portuguese to get by, and I'll learn more. As for knowing people, I'll meet them the way people have been, meeting each other for centuries. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not being treated like an incompetent child. Malkin's face had gone from pale to red. This is revenge. You're doing this to punish us. No. Malcolm, I'm doing this to save myself. The punishment is entirely of your own making. Save yourself from what? Owen demanded. From spending my remaining years being managed by people who see me as a burden. From being warehoused in a facility while you liquidate my life's work. From pretending gratitude for your intervention while you systematically strip away my dignity and autonomy. I moved to the window, looking out at the desert landscape I'd called home for 4 decades. I realized something these past few weeks. Your father didn't leave me alone. He left me free to make my own choices, pursue my own dreams, live my own life. But you couldn't allow that, could you? You needed me. Controllable, manageable, grateful. We wanted to help, Iris said weakly. No, you wanted to help yourselves. To the takers, house, to the assets, to the peace of the mind that comes from having your inheritance secured and your mother safely contained. I walked to George's desk and picked up a manila envelope. These are copies of all the legal brackage documents along with contact information for Adam Sandler. You're welcome to contest the trust. Though I should warn you, irrevocable means irrevocable. The assets are beyond your reach, regardless of what happens to me. When? Malcolm asked, his voice hollow. My flight leaves Tuesday morning. The house goes on the market Wednesday. The proceeds will be donated to organizations that support elder independence and combat elder abuse. Elder abuse? Samantha's voice was shrill. We never abused you. Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, systematic undermining of competence. What would you call it? Owen slumped in his chair as if I'd struck him. Mom, we love you. We were trying today to protect you. Love doesn't scheme to separate someone from their assets. Love doesn't conspire to warehouse someone in institutional care against their wishes. Love doesn't enlist family members to support a narrative of incompetence. I stood before them one final time. These 4 people who had forced me to choose between my dignity and their approval. I choose dignity. The room erupted in protests, pleas, accusations. Malcolm demanded I reconsider. Owen threatened legal action. Samantha accused me of being vindictive. Iris predicted I would die alone and regretful. I listened to it all with the detached calm of someone who had already departed emotionally. Their words couldn't touch me anymore because I no longer needed their approval or feared their disapproval. I have packing to finish, I said when their voices finally faded. Adam has your contact information if you need anything else. One by one, they left. No hugs, no tears, no promises to visit me in Portugal. Their departure confirmed what I'd known for months. Their concern had never been for me, only for what I now represented to their financial future. After the door closed behind them, I walked through the quiet house one final time. In the study, I packed George's favorite photographs and the letter he'd written me just before his death. The one where he'd made me promise to live fully in whatever time remained. Don't let them make you small, Carolyn. He'd written, you're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more deserving of love than they'll ever understand. If they can't see that, find people who can. Tuesday morning came, bright and clear. I stood in my empty living room with 2 suitcases and a busy carry-on bag. Everything I needed for my president. New life reduced to essentials. The rest, furniture, dishes, decorations, would be handled by the estate sale company. The taxi arrived precisely on time. As we pulled away from the house, where I'd spent half my life, I didn't look back. Some chapters ended not with resolution, but with liberation. At the sated airport, I bought a postcard showing the Phoenix skyline at sunset. I wrote, carefully, my handwriting steady despite my excitement. The food here is better. Even the nights, I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. They would know. As my flight lifted off, carrying me toward an ocean I dreamed of returning to for 4 decades. I felt George's presence beside me, not as grief, but as approval. I was finally living up to the promise I'd made him. The promise to never let anyone make me smaller than I was. Below, the desert spread endlessly, beautiful and harsh and unforgiving to those who underestimated its power, just like